They say you never really know someone until you divorce them. But I'd argue you start to see glimpses of their true self the moment they think you can't leave. Looking back now, the signs weren't subtle. They were just dressed in charm, hidden behind kisses and promises. And I wanted so badly to believe the man I married was good. My name is Danielle Reed, and this is the story of how my ex-husband laughed at me until a judge gave me everything he tried to take. When I met Marcus, I was 24 and working as a junior editor at a publishing house in Nashville. He was older, 29, confident, magnetic in a room, with a swagger that made people stop and listen when he spoke. He ran his own consulting firm, made more money than I could ever imagine, and told me I was the kind of woman men pray for. At first, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. He sent flowers to my office, showed up with surprise takeout, whispered about building a life together even before we hit 6 months. When he proposed after just a year of dating, I said yes through tears, believing this was what forever was supposed to feel like, fast, consuming, and full of certainty. The cracks didn't show all at once. It started small, a passive comment about how I dressed, a playful joke about my job being cute but not real income, a frown when I wanted to visit my sister without him. I brushed it off because love takes compromise, right? Then I got pregnant with Ava. Marcus was ecstatic, said it was a sign from God that I was meant to be a mother. He insisted I quit my job, saying we didn't need the money and the baby needed me more. I hesitated. Editing books was my dream, but he made it sound noble, selfless. "You'll thank me later," he said, kissing my forehead. "Let me take care of you." So I did. I traded manuscripts for maternity clothes and press releases for lullabies. But motherhood, while beautiful, was lonely. Marcus began staying out later for work, then getting annoyed when I asked for help with late-night feedings. "I work all day, Danielle. The least you can do is handle her at night. You don't even have a real job anymore." That one stung more than I let him see. The years blurred together. I went from being Danielle, the ambitious editor with plans, to just mom and Marcus's wife. He controlled the bank account. I had to ask for money to buy Ava new shoes. He rolled his eyes if I brought up going back to work, said I was being ungrateful. Dramatic. But it wasn't until Ava turned 5 that I realized I was living in a house full of ghosts, the ghost of who I used to be, and the ghost of the love I thought we had. That year, everything cracked wide open. I found the messages by accident. A string of texts on Marcus's iPad to someone named Sid. At first, I assumed it was work-related. But no client sends pictures in lingerie. No client says last night was everything. My stomach dropped. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He didn't cry. He didn't even apologize. He looked at me, dead in the eyes, and said, "You're lucky I stayed as long as I did." I stood there, shaking, holding Ava's favorite stuffed bunny in one hand and my entire marriage in the other. He followed it up with something I'll never forget. "You're nothing without me. You won't last a week out there." That night, while he slept, I packed Ava's clothes into a duffel bag. I didn't have a plan, just my daughter, a half-dead phone, and the desperate need to escape. I left him a note on the kitchen counter. "Don't worry, I'll figure it out. And someday, you'll regret every word you just said." The first few weeks were a blur of survival. I stayed on my best friend Kira's couch, Ava curled next to me in her Disney pajamas. I applied to every job I could find, waitressing, cleaning, data entry. Anything. I worked nights cleaning offices downtown and mornings at a diner, sometimes without sleeping in between. There were days I couldn't afford gas and fed Ava instant noodles while telling her it was special spaghetti night. I sold my engagement ring to pay the security deposit on a tiny one-bedroom apartment in a rough part of town. But you know what? Every night, even on the hardest ones, I felt more free than I had in years. And Ava? She smiled more, laughed more, slept better. Still, Marcus wasn't done with me. A month later, I was served divorce papers, his terms, joint custody, but with him as primary parent. He wanted the house, the car, and Ava 4 days a week. He said I was financially unstable and emotionally erratic. He actually laughed when I told him I'd fight for custody. What judge in their right mind would give her to you full-time? He said, grinning. And something inside me snapped. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I just nodded and said, we'll see. Because Marcus underestimated one thing. I may have walked away broke, bruised, and broken, but I was still a mother. And mothers? We don't back down when our children's well-being is on the line. That was the beginning. The beginning of the real fight. The one he never saw coming. And I would fight it not just for Ava, but for every woman who's ever been told she's too small, too soft, or too powerless to win. Because I may have lost everything, but I still had a spine. And a reason. And soon, I'd have justice. There's a kind of fear that settles into your bones when someone you once loved tries to take away the most important person in your life, not out of love, but out of spite. Marcus didn't want Ava because he missed bedtime stories or Sunday morning pancakes. He wanted her because it meant I'd still have to answer to him. Because taking her meant keeping control. When I received the custody notice, I was folding Ava's tiny socks on the floor of our new one-bedroom apartment. The knock on the door made me jump. A man handed me a manila envelope, nodded, and left. My heart dropped before I even opened it. He wanted joint custody with primary physical custody assigned to him. I read it 3 times, hoping I misunderstood. Then I saw the statements Marcus had attached. He claimed I was unstable, that I'd taken Ava without warning, that I had no job, no income, and was sleeping on a friend's couch, true at the time, but only because of what he'd done. He painted himself as the steady, responsible father, the provider, the protector. I almost threw up. I called my court-appointed attorney, who sounded overwhelmed and overworked, but kind. She told me, we'll fight it. You just have to be ready to prove your case. What case? I had nothing but my word, a minimum wage job, and an exhausted child who cried every time she had to visit her father's new high-rise apartment. Marcus, meanwhile, was living comfortably, still running his consulting firm, still taking Instagram-worthy vacations with the same woman he cheated with. His lawyer was some sleek, high-powered guy with a name like Trent or Chad, someone who probably hadn't eaten a homemade meal in years. At our first hearing, Marcus showed up in a $3,000 suit with a smug grin that made my stomach turn. He waved at me like we were at some business mixer. I felt invisible next to him, cheap, underdressed, and entirely dismissed. But I sat up straighter when the judge walked in. Because I wasn't here to be pitted. I was here to protect my daughter. That first hearing didn't accomplish much, just set the groundwork. Marcus's lawyer argued I had no stability, that I disrupted Ava's life, and that Marcus had always been the more hands-on parent since I'd struggled emotionally after giving up my job. Struggled emotionally? You mean postpartum depression? The one Marcus refused to acknowledge and told me to snap out of? He twisted truths like they were balloon animals, and I sat there swallowing my rage while Ava's future hung in the balance. After court, he smirked and leaned close enough for me to smell his expensive cologne. Told you, he whispered. You're not going to win. I always win. That night, I cried in the shower, muffling the sound with a towel so Ava wouldn't hear. Then I dried off, opened a notebook, and started writing everything down. I began building my own case, not in a legal office, but in that tiny apartment with peeling paint and a broken heater. Every missed pickup Marcus flaked on, I logged it. Every night Ava came home saying Daddy was too busy with Sid to eat dinner with her, I wrote it down. Every message he ignored, every holiday he skipped, every tear Ava shed, I documented it all. I spoke to Ava's school counselor, who told me she'd noticed Ava seemed anxious after weekends with Marcus. I asked her if she'd be willing to write a statement. She said yes. I went to our pediatrician and asked if they could note the stress-related eczema Ava had developed in the last year. They did. Meanwhile, I was working 2 jobs. Mornings at the diner, nights cleaning dental offices. Ava would sit in the break room with crayons and paper while I scrubbed sinks. My feet hurt, my back ached, but I kept going. Because I had to win. Not for revenge. But because Ava deserved better than a part-time father playing full-time power games. The lowest point came the day Ava came home with bruises on her upper arm. When I asked what happened, she flinched and said Marcus's girlfriend grabbed her too hard when she spilled juice on the rug. I reported it to Child Protective Services. They opened a file but couldn't do much without a pattern of abuse. Marcus, of course, claimed I was coaching Ava and trying to poison her against him. It felt like screaming into a void. But the thing about building a case brick by brick? Eventually, it becomes a wall strong enough to stand on. At the next court date, Ava's teacher submitted a letter detailing her sudden mood swings and withdrawal after weekends with her father. The counselor added her own report, citing emotional distress and behavioral changes. And then there was my journal, filled with dated entries, text screenshots, photos of Ava's bruises, and messages from Marcus saying, "Take her for the week, I've got a trip with Sid." The judge didn't say much that day. He flipped through the papers with a furrowed brow while Marcus shifted uncomfortably beside his suit and tie shark. This wasn't going the way he planned. Outside the courtroom, Marcus cornered me. "What do you think you're doing?" he snapped. I looked him straight in the eye for the first time in a long time. "I'm being the mother you never let me be." And for the first time, I saw it, that flicker of doubt behind his eyes. He'd treated this like a game. But I wasn't playing anymore. I was fighting. And I was just getting started. They say court is about justice, but for mothers like me, it's about survival. I didn't walk into that courtroom expecting fairness. I walked in hoping that, just once, someone would see past the lies and the labels and hear the truth in my voice. It was the final custody hearing, the one that would decide who Ava would live with, who she'd run to when she scraped her knee, who'd teach her how to braid her hair, who would hold her hand on the first day of school. I barely slept the night before. Ava was with Kira, tucked into bed with her favorite stuffed unicorn, completely unaware that tomorrow, strangers in black robes would shape the rest of her childhood. I stood in front of the mirror and stared at my reflection for a long time. I didn't look like the woman who had once smiled through wedding vows. I looked stronger, tired, but unbreakable. This was it. When I walked into the courtroom, Marcus was already there. Same smug look. Same expensive suit. Same new woman clinging to his arm like she was auditioning for a reality show. He didn't look nervous. Why would he? Men like Marcus were used to winning. Used to charming their way through life, while women like me had to fight tooth and nail for every ounce of credibility. But what he didn't know was this. I came prepared. The judge entered, a stern woman in her late 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes. She looked like the kind of person who'd seen it all and couldn't be bothered with theatrics. Good. I didn't need theatrics. I had facts. Marcus's attorney went first. He painted a glossy picture. Successful father, stable home, financially secure. He listed my instability, my lack of consistent income, the fact that I'd left the marital home, abruptly and irrationally. He called me impulsive. Impulsive, because I left a toxic marriage to protect my child. He showed printouts of Marcus's bank statements, pay stubs, even vacation photos with Ava smiling, completely ignoring the fact that she was smiling because she was 5 and had been bribed with ice cream. When it was my turn, my lawyer started simple. "Your Honor," she said, "we're not here to debate Marcus Reed's income. We're here to discuss Ava's well-being and who provides a safe, consistent, and emotionally nurturing environment." Then she handed the judge a folder I had helped assemble piece by piece over the last 6 months. Inside were school reports, teacher letters, Ava's drawings with notes like, "Me and Mommy go library," and "Mommy makes me pancakes." There were pediatrician notes about stress-induced eczema, statements from neighbors who'd seen Ava return from visits, with Marcus distant and silent, screenshots of texts where Marcus pawned off weekends, and the journal. Every missed pickup, every last-minute cancellation, every time Ava cried herself to sleep because Daddy forgot to call. I watched Marcus's face change as the judge read through each document. The confidence faded. His jaw clenched. His hands balled into fists. Then came the moment that shattered his image. The counselor Ava had been seeing, kindly, soft-spoken Miss Regina, took the stand. She described Ava's behavioral changes. The bedwetting, the nightmares, the way she recoiled when asked about Daddy's house. She didn't accuse Marcus of abuse, but the implication was clear. Ava didn't feel safe there. And in family court, that matters. Marcus leaned forward, eyes wide, whispering harshly to his lawyer. He wasn't grinning now. The man who once laughed in my face was unraveling, thread by thread, in front of the very judge he thought would hand him victory. Then it was my turn. I stood, heart pounding, knees shaking, hands clenched at my sides. "Ms. Reed," the judge said gently, "you may speak." I took a breath and looked directly at her. I'm not here to badmouth Marcus. I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes. But everything I've done in the last year, every extra shift, every night on the floor so Ava could have the bed, was for my daughter. She's 5. She shouldn't have to understand manipulation. She shouldn't flinch when someone raises their voice. She shouldn't feel like love is something she has to earn. I may not have Marcus's money, but I have presence. I'm there for every school drop-off, every fever, every scraped knee. I know what her favorite bedtime story is. I know she's scared of the dark, but not if her unicorn nightlight is on. I don't want to win this for me. I want to win it for Ava. So she can grow up knowing love doesn't have to hurt. That stability doesn't mean silence. That a home isn't made of brick and marble. It's made of safety and peace. I paused, blinking back tears. And I won't apologize for fighting for that. The courtroom was quiet. Even Marcus didn't say anything. The judge looked at me for a long moment. Then she turned to Marcus and asked a single question. "Mr. Reed, if your daughter is truly your priority, why does every record show her distress increases when she's with you?" He stammered, gave a vague answer about adjustments and discipline. But it was too late. The curtain had lifted. The judge saw what I had lived for years. That afternoon, the verdict came down. Full physical custody, granted to the mother. Marcus would get scheduled visitation. No overnights until further evaluation. Supervised if needed. I felt my knees buckle as I whispered, "Thank you." I didn't gloat. I didn't look at Marcus. I simply closed my eyes and imagined Ava, safe, loved, sleeping peacefully in her unicorn pajamas. I had won. Not for revenge. Not for ego. But for her. I didn't cry when the judge said the words. Not right away. I stood there frozen, absorbing them like they were being stitched into my skin. Full physical custody granted to the mother. 6 words. That's all it took. But behind them were months of sleepless nights, emergency daycare runs, panic attacks in grocery store parking lots, and the constant, bone-deep fear that somehow I'd lose the one thing I couldn't live without. Now I didn't have to be afraid anymore. Marcus didn't say much as we left the courtroom. He barely looked at me, just tightened his jaw, clenched his fists, and walked past me like I didn't exist. And honestly, that was fine. Because I no longer needed his attention, his approval, his validation. I had something far more powerful than anything he ever gave me. Peace. Ava was at Kira's when I picked her up that afternoon. She was playing with blocks on the floor, still wearing her favorite sparkly sneakers, her hair a mess of curls and barrettes. She looked up and grinned when she saw me. "Mommy." I scooped her into my arms and held her tighter than I ever had before. "Guess what, baby girl?" I whispered into her hair. "We're going home. And we're not going anywhere else." She didn't understand the legal weight of it, of course. But something in her relaxed. Like she knew something big had shifted. Like she could feel that the air around us had finally cleared. She didn't ask about her father. Not once. In the weeks that followed, the chaos gave way to calm. I traded in my 2 jobs for one stable office position at a local nonprofit, thanks to a friend of Kira's who knew I'd been working myself into the ground. The pay wasn't amazing, but it was steady. And for the first time, I had evenings with Ava. Dinner at a table. A bedtime routine that didn't involve fast food or exhaustion. I found a small 2-bedroom apartment with chipped tile and creaky floors, but it had sunshine in the morning and a tiny balcony where Ava and I planted strawberries in old yogurt cups. We hung her art on the fridge and painted one wall of her room in chalkboard paint so she could draw to her heart's content. And every night before bed, I told her, "You're safe. You're loved. You're home." Marcus didn't disappear, but the power he once held over me unraveled fast. He missed his first 2 scheduled visitations. The court gave him a warning. By the time he showed up for the 3rd, he was late. Ava sat in her jacket on the porch for almost an hour, fidgeting and sad, asking, "Is he coming?" He did. Eventually, in a hurry, on his phone. Barely said hello. Gave her a plastic toy and an awkward pat on the shoulder like she was some distant relative. She didn't cry when she came back that evening, but she didn't smile either. "I don't think he remembers what I like anymore," she said softly. I didn't say anything. I just held her. Because what could I say? That some men love control more than people? That being a father in name isn't the same as showing up? I let her draw her own conclusions.
Children are smart like that.
A few months later, I found out through a mutual acquaintance that Marcus and Sydney had broken up. Apparently, she'd wanted a baby. He hadn't. Or maybe she'd started to see through the charm. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need to know. Letting go of him wasn't just about winning custody. It was about releasing the weight of his opinion, of finally realizing that his voice didn't define mine. He used to say, "You're too emotional."
Now?
That emotion gave me the strength to fight for my daughter. He used to say, "No one else would put up with you."
Now?
I had a job, a home, and a little girl who adored me.
He used to laugh at me.
And now he had nothing to laugh at. One evening, Ava and I were baking banana muffins in our tiny kitchen. She was wearing my apron and had flour smudged across her nose. I was helping her stir when she looked up and said, "Mommy, I like our life."
Just like that.
Simple.
Honest.
Unprompted. My throat tightened. Because that was the win. Right there. Not the court papers. Not the judgment. Not even Marcus's silence. It was this. Flour-dusted peace. Laughter in a kitchen. A child who felt safe. That was the kind of revenge you don't gloat about. The kind that comes softly, steadily. The kind that doesn't scream. It settles like calm after a storm. Marcus still has visitation rights, but he rarely uses them. He sends birthday cards now, sometimes gifts that Ava doesn't really care for. I think part of him realizes that the distance he created, intentionally or not, can't be bridged with toys and money. But I don't waste my time resenting him anymore. Because the truth is, he lost the moment he tried to weaponize fatherhood. He underestimated a mother's love, a mother's will, a mother's fight. He laughed when I said I'd win custody.
He's not laughing now.
Some nights, when Ava's asleep and the apartment is quiet, I sit by her door and listen to her breathing, just to remind myself it's real. That we made it. That I didn't break. That I didn't just survive him. I rose above him.
And now?
Now I smile, because the best revenge I ever got was giving my daughter the life he never believed I could. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Your support means everything. If this story touched you or made you think, please subscribe to our channel for more real, powerful stories.